listening to the Lingerie Success Podcast, the first podcast of its kind committed to practical and actionable marketing strategies, business advice, interviews, and tools to help your lingerie store thrive. Are you ready? So let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lingerie Success Podcast, where we provide practical, actionable advice to help your lingerie store thrive. Today, we are excited to bring you episode 3, where we will be discussing creating buyer personas and identifying target customers. I have Kris and Angel with me here today, and we are so excited to get started. Angel, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
Oh, good to hear, Kris.
Perfect.
You're excited? How was
your
morning?
Very excited. It was great. We had a busy morning this morning. We delayed the recording of this podcast for a little bit because all three of us were being called. But I'm very excited to start this podcast and give the value to our listeners today.
Well, let's begin then.
Perfect.
So, Kris, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about target customers first. So why is it important to know who your customers are?
Sure. Well, one of the main goals for your business and the strategies are to drive more customers. Like we discussed a few podcasts ago, we want to increase consumer spend, the frequency, and getting referrals. Zig Ziglar, one of my favorite books, Secrets of Closing a Sale, once said, if people like you, they'll listen to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. That's important. For someone to know, like, and trust you, you need to understand who they are, what their pain points are, what problems they have that you can solve. Let me share a story with you guys. It's a perfect example of this. McDonald's, if you ask them, everyone is their customer. If you look at their TV ads, their billboard, and all that stuff, everybody's their customer. But when the new movie Sing, some of you may have heard it, may have seen it. For sure, a lot of parents have. And the first thing my kids wanted to do was go to McDonald's. Like I have Ash, I have Mina, I have Eddie, and whatever other toy that they have. So clearly, they're advertising and they're marketing to kids. That's one of the buyer personas that they have. And they have a play place at McDonald's, and all their remodeling is aimed towards, I guess, modernizing the look, but they still keep that target audience, which are kids. And, whenever they hit that box, I still hear that I don't want to something like from Mina singing that track over and over, which gets stuck in your head. So clearly, they've clearly defined a few target audience and buyer personas, and kids are one of them. We all know each customer is different. Each person that has bought from you has a unique buying style. In order to foster relationships and, of course, gain repeat business, you really have to determine who your ideal customer and then tailor your strategies, your communication to be able to attract and retain them. I think that's one of the most important things to equip you and add that, like we talked about last week, add that to your marketing plan.
Yeah, absolutely, Kris. And I know we just talked a little bit about buying style, and within buying style, it's important that we talk a little bit about buyer personas too. So, Kris, what is a buyer persona, and why would my business need one? Well,
a buyer persona is really a semi-fictional character or a semi-fictional persona that you have that describes who you want to influence with your marketing. Who do you want to buy from you? The ideal customers. The other thing is, we've talked about positioning yourself in your local business as an expert in your community. One of the key things for you to be able to do this is, you really need to know the different people that are listening to your message, that are consuming your product, that are potentially buying from your store. So it's important that you have these buyer personas, and that's exactly what a buyer persona is.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely. I think with buyer personas, they really should be the backbone, the foundation of your marketing plan. I know last week we talked about marketing plans and creating marketing plans. And if you missed that podcast, definitely do check it out, because that is the first step, the first podcast that you'll want to listen to before you dive deeper into this one, because buyer personas are essential for businesses. You need to know who you're marketing to, who you're talking to, who your products are going to, and who they're meant for before you can market to them, before you can provide them content and newsletters and tell them about promotions and anything else. You need to know who you're connecting to, your audience. And so, Kris, I wanted to talk a little bit more about buyer personas. So I know it's a good idea to have detailed buyer personas.
Yeah, definitely.
I know it's always a good idea to never skip out on details or anything that could help you understand a buyer persona and a customer even more. What are some key benefits to creating detailed buyer personas?
Well, one of the benefits of clearly defining your buyer persona is, knowing what their problems are and what they face. So you can tailor your content and your solution and your product and services to solve those needs and problems. The second thing, when you know what your customer spends their time on, it'll allow you to promote your service and content better. This will enable you to make a personal connection with the prospect or customer that you have. It also enables you to tailor the experience. It enables you to give the best value to your customers when they're walking through your door, or also when they're, when you're providing any content like blogs, maybe your service, your videos, and whatever content you're trying to provide to them that delivers the message that you position yourself with. And lastly, by knowing your customer, you're able to source the right products for them. That's very important. You have a lot of products on your shelf, which are beautiful lingerie, of course, but if they're not the right size, they're not the right fits, they're not the right colors, the styles that your consumer are looking for, then it puts you at a disadvantage. So it's very important that you keep those benefits in mind. I also want to touch on, your goal as a business is to constantly be providing value. I'm sure we can all agree to that. When your products and services are termed as a commodity, they can go elsewhere to buy your product. But really, as an expert, as a business owner, specializing in profiting, you offer something that very few in your community can. So it's important for you to be able to position yourselves, like we talked about in last week's podcast, as the expert in your local community. And for you to be able to do that, you really need to know who your target audience is. For example, if I'm talking to you or Angel, I would tailor maybe the message to fit what your style is, what your likes and what your wants are. And depending on your problems, depending on your pain points, I would tailor the same solution based on how it would best fit your personality, your style, and your needs. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Kris. I just wanted to add to that too. I know that with buyer personas and with communicating with your customers and being that expert that you are and showing everyone that you are that expert, it's definitely a good idea to also toot your own horn a little.
Absolutely.
I know that we published an article about this recently about tooting your horn and how important it is for your business, and also identifying your unique selling propositions.
Absolutely.
So identifying those USPs, making sure that they're known, making sure that everyone is aware of them and that they're coming to you because you're the go-to for maternity bras, for example, for bra fitting, for whatever services and products that you provide in your neighborhood that no one else does or that you provide better than anyone else. That's definitely what you want to position yourself for. And then just back to buyer personas, most importantly, it's always a good idea to be realistic about your actual customers. I know that buyer personas are semi-fictional representations of ideal customers, but it's still a good idea to look at the data and the sales of your actual customers, their ages, their demographics, their buying habits, their interests, anything that could contribute to a buyer persona that's important information, that's influencing what they're buying, when they're buying, how they're buying, is all important information that should be incorporated in those buyer personas. And a good thing to do is to talk to your current customers, call your good customers who you have a relationship with, have a conversation with them, get to know as many of the women as you can who walk through your doors, learn about their interests, their stories, what their pain points are, so that those are things that you can address. And honestly, the more you know about your community and the women who live there, the easier it'll be to segment and really market to your target customers and make sure that you're reaching the right people.
Those are great points, Katie. Thank you for adding that. That's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. And then I also wanted to mention about buyer personas, it's always a good idea to have more than one.
Yeah.
So one thing that you'll notice is that you might have more than one buyer. You might have more than one ideal character that you're writing to, that you're targeting to, that you're speaking about, and there really is no limit to the amount of buyer personas you can have. And just be sure to create buyer personas for anyone who you feel can be a good fit for your products and services. So if you're trying to attract women in your local community who are married in their 30s, maybe they have a combined income of $240,000, maybe they're looking for luxury lingerie, $80 or more price point bras, and say you only carry a handful, you only carry maybe one brand. But your customers, your bread and butter customers, are the ones who are single. Maybe they're in their late 20s. Maybe they have an income of $60,000 to $80,000, but they have student loans, and so they tend to buy the less expensive bras, maybe the ones that are $40,000 to $60,000. You want to make sure that you create buyer personas for both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So even if it's someone that you're not necessarily, they're not necessarily your main customer, you still want to create a buyer persona for them so that you can market to them, because those customers that are buying the $80 bras are interested in the luxury lingerie. You can create a separate email. You can send them separate emails. You can send them separate mailers and notifications of that lingerie when it's in your store. And those are the customers that that you can reach, when you have those products. And like Kris said, it's always a good idea to have a contact database, something that we touched on last week. But with that database and with your buyer personas, it'll really, really set you up for success in your store.
Absolutely. We'll definitely discuss that. And I believe you have a few questions that will tackle that. So that's going to be awesome to provide to our listeners as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper here with these buyer personas. So, Kris, I just wanted to ask you, so what are some categories that we should include in buyer personas?
Sure. Well, if you do a Google search, I'm sure you can. If you do a Google search looking for buyer persona templates, you'll find pretty much all the same basic information. You need to know who the person is, what they value, how best to speak to them. We'll also provide an example template in the show notes of this so that you can be able to get an idea of an example of what a typical buyer persona is. We can probably provide you the ones that we use here at Parfait. And it's really important that you have some of those basic information. But at the same time, you also need to tailor this to fit who your customers are. A lot of the templates that you'll see online are not really tailored to a lingerie store. So you want to know what styles they like, what's their cup size, what's their band size, and all this other stuff. When do they tend to buy lingerie? Is it during Valentine's? Is it during, when they want to splurge a little bit for themselves, when they receive maybe some gifts from their husbands or significant other, or for themselves? You need to know any information that can help you get to know your customers a little bit better is all the important things that you need to know, because you need to be able to have a complete picture of who your ideal customer is, and as well as who are all the other people that are shopping to your store. Sometimes you have customers that may only be buying from you when there's a sale, when you have stuff on clearance. You need to know this because, they're not, I wouldn't say they were your ideal customer, because you want people that are buying your products at full price, of course. But at the same time, these are still your customers. So getting to know them will allow you to maybe strategize and get them to a different buyer persona, maybe adjusting their buying habits and maybe educating them a little bit better. A person that just buys once a year, maybe you can advise them, your bra can change, your bra size could change, your fit could change every 6 months or so. So it might be a good idea for you to come back here 6 months from your last purchase, at least, if they normally buy once a year. So these are the type of things that you need to identify in your buyer persona. So, Katie will work on, as a team, we'll work on a template for our listeners to use as a base, but that doesn't mean that that's the only template that you'll be using, as you move forward and develop your buyer personas.
Yeah, absolutely, Kris. Those are some really good points. I did want to talk too about what you said about reaching customers and including in the buyer personas. It's so important to make sure that you're educating your customers and that the information that you're providing to them is information that they'll come to you. They'll come to you with their questions. So you want to be the person who, if they have a bra fitting question, if they're not sure if they need a new bra or if their bra size has changed, that they're coming to you to check. So you're telling them, this is how a bra is meant to fit. As you are, and then they are feeling comfortable. They know that you're the authority, you're the expert, and they're coming back to you and they're saying, okay, well, my bra's fitting a little bit different now. Should I come back and should I get another bra? So it's also providing the educational resources to them. And if you send newsletters, if you want to send maybe 6-month reminders to your customers, so you do a bra fitting and you have their information in your database and you keep track of when you fit them and you have them, you send out an email, maybe 5 months down the road, and you say, hey, just checking to see, how your bras are fitting. We're having this event, we're having this promotion, or we got this new bra in, checking to see what brands they like, what styles they like, and then getting them to come back and helping them again and selling to them again. And that's truly showing value that you're really invested in them. And people like being invested in. They like when they have stores that are reaching them, and that's why newsletters are personalized, and that's why content marketing is so important. And I wanted to talk a little bit then about the contact database. So I know that we were talking about buyer personas, and we touched on the contact database just a little bit. So Kris, why don't you tell our listeners why it's important for us to use a contact database?
Well, like we both understand, it's not only important, but it's also easier to start with the consumers that already buy from you. It just makes sense. Instead of you going out there and doing your research, Facebook ads and surveys and whatnot, it's easier to start with the people that already told you that they know, like, and trust you, and they've spent their money with you. They've already made the commitment to buy from you. You already solved the pain point for them. The best step is to communicate with them and maybe interviewing them and do a survey with them and why they bought from you. And this will give you a better picture of what problem you really solve for them. What did your store solve for them? You may know that, I gave them a properly fitting bra, but that might not be the only thing that you solve for them. It might be the service that you provided for them, the way that you and your staff tended to them when you were doing the fitting. Maybe you listened to a story that they had, the experience that they had with you. That is why it's much easier for you to start with these customers. You already have a personal connection with them. You can much easily communicate and interview someone that's already invested in your success. It's much more difficult to find out later that, when you're creating your buyer personas. A lot of us do this. I think here at Parfait, when we started doing this process, we fell into the same trap. We made a lot of assumptions about our consumer customers and as well as our partners, our retail partners. We think that they're a certain way based on just a few feedback that we've heard, but we hadn't had a chance to talk to them. But when we took the time to really communicate with the retail partners that we have, engage with the social media customers that we engage with, we were able to find out who they really are. So we're able to escalate the content marketing that we've been doing to really hone in and target those consumers and those retail partners. And this podcast is a direct result of knowing what those pain points are. So it's important that, for us, when we did our new buyer personas, new target audience, we really looked at who our customer are right now and developed this for them.
Yeah, absolutely, Kris. I completely agree. I think that is definitely good information for our listeners. When you were speaking, it reminded me of an article that I read recently. I know that I referenced it in one of my recent blog posts. I'll link to it in the show notes. But it was talking about buyer personas and not naming your buyer personas. Oh. And this is so, so important. I read the article with an open mind. I wasn't sure what to expect because in marketing, you're trained to name your personas. You're trained to give them a name, give them an age. You're basically creating these little Sims, these little ideal characters that are shopping in your store. And so I read the article and it was talking about not naming your buyer personas. It said that one of the reasons why they said not to name your buyer personas is that you might find that you end up stereotyping them accidentally. It's not true. Even something that you're doing intentionally. You might have a certain demographic that you end up stereotyping, and it affects their buying habits. And maybe that customer that's shopping with you does not have those buying habits. So it's definitely a good idea if you decide to say buyer persona number 1, buyer persona number 2. You can definitely do that. It's a good idea. You don't necessarily have to name your buyer personas and give them that. And that's something that we'll link to in the show notes. And I wanted to talk a little bit too, Kris, about online. So I know that a lot of our customers have online websites, and they have a lot of customers that shop online and they do business online. So is it a good idea to create buyer personas for online customers too?
Yeah, it definitely is, because like I said, a buyer persona will consist of how they consume your information, how they buy from you, and what's the best place for you to be able to meet with them. You're not meeting with them in person on the website, so your content, your website, that's your virtual storefront. So it's important for you to be able to create a buyer persona targeting those specifically. I think in the latter podcast that we're going to be talking about marketing automation, doing sequences and all of these great things. Because what these will allow you to do is they'll allow you to create a sequence to follow up with these personas, with these online customers, without having to actually manually do it. And for you to be able to set up those personas, I think we've discussed this here in Parfait. Creating those workflows and those marketing automations are hinged on having the right buyer persona for your online profile, because they consume content differently, they act differently, they might be a totally different age group, their buying patterns are different. We always talk about different generations. We know that the newer generations, like the millennials, they like to research a lot of stuff. I think Gen X is the same thing, but more so than baby boomers. They like to research things, make sure that they're getting the best deal. So positioning your online information, positioning your prices, positioning your products online is important. But for you to be able to do that, you really need to clearly define who that persona is. So absolutely, I definitely suggest and recommend that if your store has a online presence, you do create one. Actually, even if you don't have one, even if you're just relying on your Facebook, that is also your online presence. You should definitely create an online person, because maybe the people that are consuming you online are not ready to buy, but your online process is trying to get them to your store. So it's important for you to create a buyer persona to get them through that process when they're researching somebody to do a bra fitting for them, or they heard about you on Facebook, to get them, to provide them the education and content to drive them down to your funnel and get them to walk into your store so you can convince them to make a purchase and invest in your success.
Absolutely, Kris. And I just wanted to add to that as well. When you're writing your buyer personas, don't leave out social media. Make sure that you put how long that person is spending on Facebook, what they're doing on Facebook, how long they're spending on Instagram, what they're doing on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, any main social media channel that they're visiting. You want to make sure that you're including that in your buyer personas, because you might find that you will have your multiple buyer personas, and you may have someone who spends 6 hours a day on Facebook and goes online to mainly connect with their friends, their family. That's how they maintain relationships online with people that they don't live with. And then you may also find people who go online for 3 hours a day and they're just looking for clothes, and they're just shopping, and they're going to forums, they're going to websites, they're shopping. That's their mode online. So you want to make sure that you have detailed information like that in your buyer personas, so that you can address and make sure that the content that you're producing, whether you're producing a blog post, a social media post, that it's targeting your buyer personas. And it's always a good idea to remember too that the content that you put out with social media and with blogs, won't necessarily be for all of your buyer personas. You might write one blog post, for example, for one buyer persona with one person, one group in mind. You might write a social media post or post a notification about a sale with a certain buyer persona in mind. So your content, that's why you want to make sure that you have different forms of content that you're producing, because you're going to have different buyer personas, and it's a good idea to have diverse content so that you can reach all of your buyer personas with all of your content, so that you're spending your time wisely.
Absolutely.
Kris, so normally when we talk about buyer personas, we talk about quote-unquote positive buyer personas. So positive being ideal customers, being semi-fictional characters, people who are happy to shop with you, who come back, who like your products and services, may review your products, recommend you to their friends and family. You have good relationships, good transactions, everything's good. But sometimes you have a negative buyer persona. And I wanted to talk a little bit about negative buyer personas. I know that negative buyer personas are typically semi-fictional representations of consumers that aren't the right fit for your products. But I was hoping, Kris, you could expand a little bit on that and tell us maybe what to expect from a negative buyer persona and what to include.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about an ideal customer. You always, I'm sure a lot of the listeners that we have out there have had the experience of somebody walking through their door, and when that customer, mind you, it's not the best experience, but they always think, that person, I don't like buying from us. That is your ideal negative consumer persona. It's somebody, non-ideal. Yeah. So you don't want them to come back from you. I mean, you can't stop people like that from buying from you, but because you've identified who they are, you've identified what they're like, how they talk, how they consume, how they buy from you, what their experience, what they put you and your staff through. When that person or multiple person walk into your door, you would know how to handle them. That's the most important thing. You're not going to say like, oh, this is a non-ideal customer, a negative persona. Please step out of the door. I mean, That's not what you would normally do. I mean, it's your business. You could do whatever you want, but at the same time, you knowing and identifying this allows you to really hone in and maybe convert them into a more ideal consumer by maybe strategizing some key content, some key education factors for you to be able to tailor their experience to get them to become an ideal customer. Find out what they're irritated about and maybe concentrate on those things and convert them into a more ideal customer.
Yeah, Kris, those are all good points for our listeners, just with negative buyer personas and the fact that they are non-ideal. But being non-ideal, they might also be people who aren't even interested in your products. So maybe it's someone who is walking into the door, maybe two women are shopping, and one woman is interested in your products and her friend isn't. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes she has found something somewhere else. Maybe she buys bras online, maybe she has a specific reason why she does, where she doesn't want to shop with you. But sometimes you do have those people who aren't interested, who no matter what you do, you might bend over backwards, you might have the most beautiful products and the most amazing service, but for whatever reason they're just not interested. And that's why it's so important to have your negative buyer personas too, so that you can identify those women, so that you don't spend as much time with them as you would with someone who is an ideal, who is happy to buy from you and ready to shop from you, so that you're still giving them both the same amazing service, but maybe you're spending just a little bit more time with your ideal buyer personas. And then Kris, I did want to talk about buyer personas and creating personalized marketing material. I know we touched on it a little bit, but what are some things that we can keep in mind when using buyer personas to create personalized material? Sure.
Well, I just wanted to, I'm looking at my notes here, and I had a quote from Zig Ziglar again. People don't buy for logical reasons. They buy for emotional reasons. And when you know exactly who your customer target is, last week we talked about your unique selling proposition. This week we're talking about coming up with your ideal customer. Putting those two things together are important so you can tailor the experience for all of those buyer personas. I'm gonna, in the show notes, we'll include a link. There's this very, very well-written article from Artificia that gave us a lot of different general buyer personas that are typical to the U.S. retail market. There's about 12 of them. Of course, this is not the end-all, be-all, but it's good for you to be able to share in this information, which we'll include in the show notes, like I said. So when you have these unique selling propositions together with your target audience and your buyer personas, you're able to tailor the experience, again, for your customers. If they're typically consuming information, majority of your customers are consuming information on their mobile phone. So it's clear that majority of your ads, your advertising, maybe if you do Facebook ads, you concentrate them on mobile. If majority of your customers are on Facebook, regular social media, you can be able to target your ads to attract those ideal customers and tailor the message. If somebody like you love vintage. If I know you love vintage, I'm not going to show you stuff that are maybe modern. I would show you maybe I love your eyeglasses. So I would show you an image with somebody that you can relate with on the ad. So those are the reasons why you need to be able to know your buyer audience, know your unique selling proposition, and then customize your marketing message to really deliver the maximum impact and value to those consumers.
Yeah, I agree completely, Kris. And tailored marketing is marketing. It's where marketing is today. Content marketing is everything, and no one wants to be interrupted when they're receiving marketing now. We're constantly bombarded with notifications and emails and newsletters, and the more tailored and precise and exact that your newsletter can be, the more likely that it'll be opened, read, and then actually the customer will take action. So that's definitely what you want.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to close with some points about this. A buyer persona can really change how your store and your message is viewed. At the end of the day, buyer personas will help you hone your audience and better position your expertise and products to solve their problems. And when you solve their problem, everyone wins. Your store success, it doesn't really depend on every single customer in the world, of course, but your success is reliant on key focused customers who really care about your business, who are raving fans of your business. So you're strategizing your message, your content, your product and service to attract these ideal customers, will ultimately mean value for them. And at the end of the day, bottom line, revenue for your store.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, Kris. And thank you so much for mentioning it. When you're providing value, customers automatically recognize that, and they'll shop with you. They'll come back to you. So I know even in the first podcast, we talked about how this was actually episode 0, where we talked about how we wanted to increase traffic to your stores and drive that business. Absolutely. Buyer personas are definitely one of those avenues for driving business to your store, and they are so effective. So never underestimate the power of a buyer persona.
Definitely. Well, I want to invite every listener to, again, visit lingeriesuccess.com to access more episodes, articles, and tips that we're coming up with here in the team. I also want to encourage you, join the community. We've created a Facebook group. You can look for it on Facebook. Lingerie Success is the Facebook group, so you can connect with us and potentially connect with other lingerie store owners, share ideas, tips, strategies to really help your store thrive. We'll have links to our show notes about this as well. But, let's not forget, please do share, subscribe, leave a rating, and review. We're live on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, on YouTube. Please do leave a message, leave a note, leave a comment so that we can be able to make this podcast even more valuable to you and keep delivering you the impactful, practical advice that you're looking for.
Yes, thank you so much, Kris. And we are so excited every week to bring you this information, our tips and tricks to help your business and help your lingerie store thrive. And I just wanted to thank you again for being here with us today and joining us. And hopefully the tips that we use will help you, and they'll increase business for your store, because that's definitely one of our main goals. And I just wanted to thank also Kris and Angel for being here too.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you next week.
See you guys next week.
This podcast is brought to you by Parfait. For more information, show notes, and downloads, please go to www.lingeriesuccess.com.